My family thought my guest house was a free ride for my freeloading brother. But to protect my home, I created a fake tenant, a lie that would soon walk right up my driveway. The smell of my mom's Sunday pot roast usually brings me a sense of comfort, a nostalgic anchor to my childhood. But lately, it's been the scent of an impending ambush. For the past 3 months, ever since I closed on my house, these family dinners had become less about catching up and more about a strategic campaign waged by my parents and my younger brother Leo. The target? My financial and emotional fortitude. And, more specifically, my brand new guest house. I'm 29. I worked my tail off through college, landed a decent job in tech, saved aggressively, and finally bought a small, charming house in a quiet neighborhood. The selling point wasn't the main house, but the converted garage out back. A perfect self-contained guest house with a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and its own little patio. I spent the first 2 months pouring my savings and my soul into renovating it. New floors, fresh paint, a little garden. It was my sanctuary, my project, my proof that all the 12-hour workdays had been worth it. Leo is 25. Leo is a creative. That's the family-approved term for chronically unemployed and allergic to responsibility. His life is a string of failed passion projects funded by my parents, a podcast about ancient aliens, a line of artisanal dog leashes, a disastrous attempt at becoming a day trader. His current venture was being a soundscape artist, which seemed to involve a lot of napping and playing video games in my parents' basement. Tonight, the ambush began early. "You know, honey," my mom started, passing me the gravy boat, "Leo was just saying how the acoustics in the basement are really stifling his process." I spooned a minimal amount of gravy onto my mashed potatoes. "That's a shame." "It really is," my dad chimed in, his voice full of false gravitas. "A true artist needs the right environment to flourish." Leo, who had been shoveling roast beef into his mouth, nodded sagely. "The vibrations are all off. It's affecting my frequency. I almost choked on my water." For weeks, they'd been dropping hints. How wonderful it was that I had so much space. How lonely I must be in that big house all by myself. How perfect the guest house would be for a studio. I'd deflected each time, changing the subject, feigning ignorance. But I could feel the end game approaching. Leo wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and then dropped the bomb. He didn't ask. He didn't propose. He announced, "So, I've got some amazing news for everyone, especially for you," he said, pointing his fork at me with a magnanimous grin. "I've decided to take the next big step in my career. I'm moving into the guest house next weekend." Silence fell over the table. Not a shocked silence, but a performative one. My mother clasped her hands together, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, Leo, that's wonderful." My dad beamed. That's my boy. Taking initiative, I just stared at him. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. He had already decided. He hadn't even bothered to construct it as a question. In his mind, my property was a family commodity, a resource to be allocated by the committee of him and my enabling parents. He was already mentally decorating the space I had bled and sweat for. I figure I'll take the first week to really get my energy centered in the space, he continued, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my eyes. Then I'll start moving my equipment in. The big window will be perfect for my synth setup. I might need to paint the back wall a darker color, though, something to absorb the sound better. Charcoal, maybe? My mother turned to me, her smile so bright it was blinding. Isn't this perfect? You'll have your brother right there with you. It'll be just like when you were kids, the unspoken part hung heavy in the air. And you can look after him. You can make sure he eats. You can float him money when he's short. The silent agreement in my family was that my wins were communal property, and Leo's needs were the primary mortgage against them. I put my fork down slowly, the clink of metal on ceramic unnaturally loud in the room. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the silence stretch, letting them all watch me. Leo's smug smile began to falter, just a little. My parents' expectant faces flickered with the first hint of confusion. They had expected me to roll over, maybe with a token protest, but to ultimately give in. They always expected me to be the responsible one, the one who kept the peace. But as I looked at my brother, planning the color scheme of a home that wasn't his, a cold, crystalline calm washed over me. The anger was still there, but it had solidified from a raging fire into a sharp, clear icicle. I was done keeping the peace. It was time to introduce a little chaos. I gave them my sweetest, most accommodating smile. Actually, Leo, your timing is unbelievable. Its perfect relief washed over my parents' faces. Leo's grin returned, wider than ever. I knew you'd see it. It just makes sense. It really does, I said, my smile not wavering an inch. In fact, since you're planning on being there next weekend anyway, you can give him a hand with the last of his boxes. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. My mother's brow furrowed. Him? Honey, who are you talking about? I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment, the beautiful, delicious turning of the tables. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's all been such a whirlwind. I must have forgotten to mention it. I'm talking about Robert, my new tenant. The name hung in the air like a puff of smoke. Robert. It sounded solid, dependable, and most importantly, real. The color drained from my mother's face. My dad's folksy charm evaporated, replaced by a thunderous scowl. Leo just stared at me, his fork hovering halfway to his open mouth, a piece of potato threatening to fall. Who? My dad said, his voice dangerously low. "Is Robert?" "He's my tenant," I repeated, keeping my tone light and breezy. "He signed the lease on Tuesday." He's a retired history professor, incredibly quiet, and pays his deposit in cash. He's moving his books in on Saturday morning. Every word was a lie, a beautiful, perfect, load-bearing lie I was constructing in real time. Leo finally found his voice. It was a high-pitched squeak of indignation. "You rented it out? You rented out my studio?" "It was never your studio, Leo," I said, meeting his gaze. "It was always a guest house, an asset that I planned to use to help pay the mortgage on the house I bought with my own money." "But family helps family," my mother wailed, finally snapping out of her stupor. "You wouldn't even have that house if we hadn't taught you the value of hard work." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with my steak knife. "You're choosing a stranger over your own blood?" my dad boomed, slamming his palm on the table. The dishes rattled. "For a little bit of money? That's what this family means to you?" This was their classic move, the pincer attack of my father's anger and my mother's tears. It had worked on me for 29 years, a finely honed tool of emotional manipulation designed to make me feel small, selfish, and eternally indebted to them. But not tonight. Tonight, the icicle in my chest was holding firm. "This has nothing to do with what the family means to me," I said calmly, folding my napkin and placing it on the table. "This is about Leo expecting a free ride in a $500,000 property while contributing nothing. It's about the three of you deciding what to do with my home without even consulting me. The guest house is rented. It's done. There's a legally binding contract." Leo threw his fork down, splattering gravy on the tablecloth. "A contract? You signed a piece of paper to officially screw me over? I was counting on that place. My whole creative vision was built around that space." "Then maybe you should have built a budget and a rental application into your creative vision," I shot back. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The pot roast on my plate was cold now. The whole room felt cold. "Thank you for dinner, Mom." It was illuminating. "I have to go. Early start tomorrow." "You are not walking away from this," my dad ordered. "Watch me," I said, turning and heading for the door. My mother started crying in earnest. "She's being so cruel, Bill." I don't know what's gotten into her. I was almost out the door, my hand on the knob, when Leo's voice, dripping with a venom I had never heard from him before, stopped me in my tracks. "Fine, go!" he yelled at my back. "Run off to your precious house, but this isn't over. I'm coming over on Saturday, just like I said, and I'm going to have a little chat with this Robert. We'll see how quiet and dependable your tenant is when I explain that he's living in my home." The drive home was a blur of adrenaline and righteous fury. Leo's threat echoed in my head. He was actually planning to show up and harass a man who didn't exist. The absurdity of it was almost comical, but the underlying malice was terrifying. My brother, the gentle soundscape artist, was willing to threaten and intimidate a complete stranger, a hypothetical elderly professor, no less, to get what he felt he was owed. It was a new low, even for him. I walked into my quiet, empty house and took a deep breath. The panic I had held at bay during dinner began to bubble up. I had called their bluff, but now I had to produce a hand. I had 48 hours to find a Robert. My first instinct was to call my best friend Sarah and beg her husband Mark to stand in. But Mark was a baby-faced engineer who looked younger than Leo. He wouldn't be a convincing retired professor. I scrolled through my contacts, a desperate litany of names. No one fit the bill. I couldn't ask a coworker. It was too weird and unprofessional. The lie was starting to feel less like a brilliant strategic move and more like a net I'd cast around my own feet. I spent all of Friday in a state of low-grade terror, my phone buzzing with texts from my mom ranging from guilt-tripping, "I can't believe you're tearing this family apart," to passive-aggressive demands. "Leo needs to know what time on Saturday so he can coordinate with your tenant." I ignored them all, my stomach twisting into a tighter knot with each message. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of bright, cheerful sunshine that felt like a personal insult. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, watching the clock tick towards 10 a.m., the time Leo had declared he would be gracing me with his presence. I had no Robert. My grand plan had crashed and burned. I was going to be exposed as a liar, and the fallout would be nuclear. I'd have to either capitulate and let Leo move in, or sell the house and move to another country. At 9:45, a wave of defeat washed over me. I was mentally drafting the apology text when a loud, rumbling sound pulled me from my misery. A massive, slightly rusted pickup truck, the kind that looks like it eats smaller cars for breakfast, was pulling into my driveway. It was towing a small trailer loaded with what looked like beehives. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I accidentally double-booked my fictional tenant with a real-life moving day for a new neighbor? A man swung out of the driver's seat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a thick, grizzled beard that was more salt than pepper. He looked to be in his late 50s, with kind, crinkly eyes, but a no-nonsense set to his jaw. He was wearing a flannel shirt and worn jeans, and he moved with a quiet, powerful confidence. He strode up my walkway and knocked firmly on the front door. I opened it a crack, my mind racing. "Morning," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that matched his truck. "You the owner of this place?" Yes. Can I help you?" "Name's Bob," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Your neighbor. Just moved in down the street a few weeks ago. My wife said you just bought this place. Welcome to the neighborhood. Listen, I know this is a heck of an ask, but my wife's sister is coming with her kids for the day, and our yard is a mess. I was hoping I could maybe park my trailer here on the edge of your drive for a few hours, just to get it out of the way. I'll be gone by noon, promise. My brain stalled, then rebooted with a single flashing thought. Bob. His name was Bob. Close enough. "You're a beekeeper?" I asked, gesturing weakly at the trailer. He chuckled. "Hobbyist. Keeps me busy now that I'm retired." My eyes widened. Retired? My heart began to beat a frantic, hopeful rhythm. "Retired from what, if you don't mind me asking?" "Taught history at the university for 30 years, he said with a proud smile. "Ancient civilizations." It was so perfect, so utterly and impossibly perfect, that I felt a dizzying surge of something that felt like divine intervention. This was my Robert. This was my quiet, retired history professor. He was real. Just then, my brother's obnoxious little sports car screeched to a halt at the curb. Leo got out, dressed in black skinny jeans and a self-importantly stark T-shirt, a look of grim determination on his face. He saw me, saw the massive man on my doorstep, and his eyes narrowed. Bob turned to see what I was looking at. "Everything all right?" he asked, his friendly demeanor shifting slightly, becoming more protective. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath, looked straight at my approaching brother, and gave the man beside me the most grateful, welcoming smile of my entire life. "Everything is perfect," I said to Bob. "I'm so glad you're here. Leo, come and meet my new tenant." I turned back to the kindly, burly, beekeeping history professor. "Bob, this is my brother. He's here to help you unload your books." Leo stopped dead in his tracks on the walkway, his jaw slackening. He looked from my beaming face to the man-mountain standing next to me, then to the pickup truck that looked like it could crush his car without noticing. His brain visibly struggled to compute the scene. This was not the frail, elderly academic he had planned to intimidate. This was a man who looked like he could wrestle a bear and offer it a honey stick afterwards. "Tenant?" Leo stammered, his eyes wide. "That's me," Bob said, his voice a friendly rumble, but his eyes were sharp, taking in my brother's hostile posture. He extended his hand again. "Bob, Robert, if you're formal, and you must be Leo. Heard you were coming by to help with the move-in." My brother looked at Bob's outstretched hand like it was a venomous snake. He didn't take it. "Move in? What move in? There are no books. That's a trailer full of... Are those bees?" "Yep," Bob said cheerfully, dropping his hand. "Just bringing a couple of my gentlest hives over. Figured they'd like the garden back there. Good for the pollination. Don't worry, they're docile as kittens, unless you try to mess with their home." He gave Leo a pointed yet friendly look. They're very protective of their space, much like me. The subtle threat, wrapped in a blanket of neighborly charm, was a masterpiece. Leo paled, the entire foundation of his plan, that I was a liar, that he could bully his way into my guest house, had crumbled to dust. He was face to face with a real, live, 6'4" tenant who kept stinging insects for fun. I, uh, you, Leo sputtered, looking to me for some kind of explanation, some crack in the story. I just smiled, a picture of serene innocence. Leo, it's rude to stare. Are you going to help Robert with his things or not? He's got a lot of heavy boxes of books back at his old place, I'm sure. That was the final blow. The thought of actual physical labor, of helping this man move into the space he'd already claimed as his own, was too much for him. His face twisted into a mask of pure fury and humiliation. He shot me a look so filled with hatred it could have curdled milk. "I'm not your free labor," he spat, not at Bob, but at me. He turned on his heel, stomped back to his car, and peeled away from the curb with a squeal of tires, the automotive equivalent of a toddler's tantrum. I watched him go, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel a shred of guilt, only a profound, cleansing relief. I turned back to Bob, my face breaking into a genuine, massive grin. I cannot thank you enough. I owe you. Big time. He chuckled, the crinkles around his eyes deepening. I might not be a professor anymore, but I can still read a situation. That boy looked like he had a whole lot of entitlement and not a lot of respect. Glad I could help. He gestured to his trailer. So, you mind if I park this here for a bit? The wife's not kidding about her sister. Park it for as long as you want, I said, laughing. In fact, how do you feel about renting a guest house? The rent is a plate of my mom's Sunday pot roast once a month, which, I promise, is better than it sounds. Bob laughed, a deep, hearty sound that filled the sunny morning. Tempting offer, but my wife would kill me. We just finished unpacking. He winked. But if you ever need a fake tenant again, you know where I live. Just down the street, as he moved his truck, I stood on my porch, basking in the quiet victory. The lie had become a hilarious, perfect truth. My parents called later, of course. My mother cried. My father yelled. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a liar, but their words had lost their power. I listened calmly, told them my tenant was a lovely man, and that they were welcome to meet him sometime if they could be civil. Then I told them I had to go and hung up. The guest house stands empty for now. It's my quiet space, my sanctuary. But it's no longer a source of conflict. It's a symbol of my independence, a boundary I finally drew in the sand. And every time I see Bob walking his dog or tending his garden, I smile. I didn't just get a house. I got a home, a great neighbor, and most importantly, I finally got my life back, and it's a whole lot quieter without the buzz of my family's constant demands. The gentle hum of Bob's bees is much sweeter.